Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? First thing, let's get a reaction. Saints-Eagles trade. What was your thoughts?
Okay, I first thought that the Saints kind of got fleeced in this deal, but then I realized the Saints brand is to kick the can further down the road and stay competitive every season. And with DeMario Davis being 33 years old, Cameron Jordan turning 33 this summer, two linchpins of that really good defense over the last 5 to 10 years, Michael Thomas finally coming back, and certainly with some holes at left tackle, maybe interior defensive line, wide receiver, it was probably a necessary move, especially given that the NFC is a little bit weaker, or a lot weaker than it was like 3 to 6 months ago with all the transactions, many of the big ones happening with NFC stars going over to the AFC. The Saints just want to remain competitive, and I think they feel like if we get two good players here in the middle of the first round, like you mentioned, 3 in the top 50, if we hit even on 2 of those 3 picks, we can be in the NFC playoffs this season.
So let's look at what the Saints might do with those picks, Chris. 3 in the top 50. When you look at your board, where is the value going to be for the Saints at 16 and 19? What positions, what guys of value might be there?
Probably wide receiver would stick out first, although we probably will have 1, if not 2 receivers off the board at that point. But I think Tre'Quan Burks from Arkansas, who's a really good wide receiver that your listeners certainly know from the SEC.
Sure.
I'm not worried about his 40 time being 4.55 at 6'2", 225. He's a horse. He reminds me a lot of A.J. Brown, DJ Moore of the Panthers, just very, very good after the catch. Jameson Williams could even be there. I mean, they probably want someone who can play right away, more so than someone that tore his ACL in the national title game. Wide receiver feels good. Edge rusher, if they wanted to go in that direction, probably not, though, given what they have at that position. And then corner. It's a very deep corner class that's more than just Derek Stingley and Sauce Gardner. Andrew Booth from Clemson, 2 cornerbacks from Washington, Trent McDuffie and Kyler Gordon. Andrew Booth from Clemson, I'm a big fan of. It's even Kyer Elam from Florida, who's a younger prospect, great in man coverage when he's not super grabby down the field. So this just opens up a lot of for the Saints to have those first 2 picks inside the top 20.
You said initially you thought the Saints got fleeced on the deal. Why was your thought that initially?
Because of the first rounder and the second rounder in 2024. But I think Mickey Loomis, Jeff Ireland, they are in the now. They're in the present. They've always done that. And with Drew Brees, they were always restructuring his deal, kicking it ahead to the future. This year they have cap space. Next year they're set to have the least amount of cap space in the NFL. But we are in an era where teams are going all in and they're trying to get as many marquee established stars as they can get just to be good in the given year. So that's why after a few minutes, I realized, hey, this is not a normal organization that's building ahead for the next 5 to 10 years. And I think Jameis Winston was the best value signing in free agency in terms of he's a good quarterback, important position on the field, and he wasn't signed to a monstrous contract, and the Saints didn't have to trade multiple picks to get him like the Washington Commanders did with Carson Wentz, some of the other trades that went down. I think they can win and be a above 500 team with Jameis Winston, especially, though, if they hit on these picks. I just didn't love the future selections that they gave away in this trade.
Okay. I'm glad you went to quarterback because that seems to be the giant question that everybody here has. Are the Saints positioning themselves to take a quarterback either at 16 or 19 or package those picks together to move up to get someone that they like? What's your thought on the Saints and the possibility of drafting a quarterback in round 1?
Okay, well, for as much as I just said that I like Jameis Winston as a player, I think it was a great value signing. If the Saints either do one of those two things. They just believe that, say, Desmond Ridder is going to be there, or Kenny Pickett's going to be the first quarterback off the board, and maybe Malik Willis will be available, or they do what you mentioned, package those picks up to get inside the top 10 or so to pick Malik Willis. I would like the trade a lot more. I'm much more of an advocate of trading up in round one if it's for a quarterback. If they just were trying to get ahead of the Chargers to pick the fourth or the fifth left tackle off the board, I won't like it as much just in a vacuum. I think Malik Willis is the best quarterback in this class that has upside similar to Deshaun Watson, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert. He's that much of a talent where if you have a good environment around him, and I think the Saints still do, he can become a franchise quarterback.
So Malik Willis, potentially, where do you have other possible landing spots for Willis in round one if he comes off the board before the Saints pick at 16?
Well, I think he could go as high as number 2 overall to the Lions, but they're kind of a mystery. We don't really know how they're viewing their team building process. Are they just going to stick it out with Jared Goff, or do they want to have someone that's already, getting that redshirt season under him? So 2 to the Lions, the Falcons at 8, maybe the Panthers at 6, but it feels like they're going to lean Kenny Pickett. There's not a lot of teams in front of them that are obvious glaring needs at the quarterback position. Washington Commanders, even though they traded for Carson Wentz, there's still some thought that, planning for the future. Minnesota Vikings, planning for the future after Kirk Cousins, maybe Seattle at 9. Normally at this point, we have 3 or 4 teams, especially in the top half of the first round, that are like obviously going to pick a quarterback. I really think we only have 1, maybe 2 of those with Carolina and Seattle this year.
Chris Trapasso is with a CBS Sports Draft analyst. Part of the idea here, Chris, is the Saints obviously have a glaring need at left tackle, and they clearly need help at receiver. So what if Trevor Penning's there at 16 and they get one of the receivers, you mentioned Burks, or maybe it's Olave or one of those guys at 19? Would that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think, like I said, just from the draft navigation side of it, I would like for them to move up and pick a quarterback because of the positional value. But if they ultimately go Trevor Penning and say Chris Olave, I think they would be getting 2 quality players that they spent a little bit more for. But again, that they must feel like they're in this, hey, we still have some good older players. Let's not tear it down. Let's try to make the playoffs and see what happens, especially if they're really feeling good about Jameis Winston. So that right now feels like the most likely scenario. That the first pick will be Trevor Penning because there's this top 3 at the offensive tackle spot of the elite types, and then Trevor Penning's right behind them, and it feels like that's where he's ultimately going to go. And maybe they just wanted to move at least that second pick ahead of the Eagles so they didn't have another receiver-needy team in front of them. I mean, it was the team that they traded with, but that would certainly make a lot of sense, especially given the tweet that Daniel Jeremiah sent out yesterday that he talked to some GMs and they said, hey, the Saints just feel like they're 2 players away from being an NFC contender. I think the NFC is more wide open than it's been in a long time.
When you scout Penning, what's the scouting report on him? Because look, Northern Iowa, that's not a spot where a lot of people here just know a lot about him.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, everything about his physicality that everyone saw at the Senior Bowl is certainly there on film. He's a nasty finisher. And I like with Penning, 6'6" and 330. Usually a lot of the small school offensive linemen are a little smaller. It's like, oh, hey, they need to get a lot more powerful. They need to add some weight. He doesn't. He has an NFL left tackle body right now. I don't think he is a high caliber athlete right now. I know he tested really well. I didn't see that on film, but everything that he does from a technical standpoint, he's very balanced. Despite being as powerful as he is, he's not lunging out over his feet, getting over anxious, and he's equally as good of a run blocker as he is in pass protection. He is one of the more NFL-ready offensive tackles in this class. I just don't know about how much upside he has because the athleticism that was there with Teron Armstead, of course, is not there with Penning.
That makes sense. The other thing that is really interesting is the value the Saints have gotten out of round 2 in recent years. If it was Marcus Williams or Michael Thomas or guys like Von Bell, they've gotten they've really done exceptionally well in round 2 at identifying starting caliber players. What do you think is the value with that 49th pick this year?
Maybe defensive tackle. There's really Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt that are probably going to go in round 1. And there's not a lot more in terms of top end talent at that position. But Logan Hall from Houston, Fedarian Mathis from Alabama, Matthew Butler from Tennessee, any one of those 3 in round 2, I think would certainly help out this pass rush that, in my opinion, needs some work from the interior. So the defensive tackle group, corner if they want to go in that direction, and then maybe interior of the offensive line if they're not super set on any one of the 3 players on the inside there, or even tight end, even with Taysom Hill moving to tight end if they wanted to add to that position. Feels like more in round 2 is where we're going to see a lot of these players go off the board. And really, wide receiver as well. Like I think it's a pretty good top-end class at that position, but on the second day of the draft, there'll still be some quality players picked at wide receiver. That's been the case the last 3 or 4 drafts.
Chris, before we go, 2 things on LSU's Pro Day. One, we got to see Derek Stingley work out today. So how much did he help himself with the workout today?
Dude, huge. He's my number 2 overall player in this draft class, and it was almost like vindication for me because I said this guy, when he's healthy, is an absolutely elite talent. And I tweeted today that it's never left my mind that Derek Stingley was the best cornerback in the country at 18 years old. Like, that was an incredible feat. And not only to test as well as he did, 38.5-inch vertical, run 4.37 and 4.44 in his 2 40-yard dash attempts. The fact that he was 5 weeks removed from a Liz Frank surgery or being cleared for that Liz Frank surgery is huge. I think a lot of people expected him, hey, maybe he's not really 100%. He wasn't able to train. He looked effortless in that 40-yard dash video that I watched. I think he helped his draft stock out a ton. Probably will be the second corner off the board after Sauce Gardner, but me, someone as a draft analyst, it's not about how high you go. It's about how good of a pro you are, and I like Derek Stingley more than Sauce Gardner.
Did I see you also? I was looking at your tweets earlier. Are you a Cordell Flott fan also?
Love Cordell Flott. He's such a unique body type at like 6 foot and like 175 pounds, but his explosiveness, changing directions from the slot is outstanding. That's what you need at that position. You need to be able to be twitchy, and you're going to have separation when you're covering a slot receiver. How quickly can you close that window once the Hunter Renfrow or the Cole Beasley, makes his move inside out and gets open over the middle? I think Cordell Flott can really close that window in a hurry. He ran 4.40 today, 34-inch vertical. And I just think his film is really good. He's one of the more underrated cornerbacks in this class.
There's the tweet was you quote tweeted Cordell Flott's 40 time, and you put hashtag draft crush. I love that.
Yeah.
Before you go, who else either helped themselves or hurt themselves today at LSU's Pro Day?
Probably Glenn Logan helping himself, running that 4.99 in the 40-yard dash. I saw a tweet that drew some oohs and ahs from the scouts and the media there. LSU has a long history of really NFL-ready defensive tackles. Certainly Neil Farrell Jr. has more height than Glenn Logan, but to just put that out there, 27.5-inch vertical is pretty good for a defensive tackle. That probably helped him maybe squeak into one of the last couple rounds of the draft.
He is Chris Trapasso, CBS Sports draft analyst. Always good enough to give us a couple of minutes of his time on what is a busy day and busy time, certainly. We appreciate it as always, man. Thanks. All the best. We'll talk soon.
All right. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.